निविद बोल कर
Hello everyone. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Hello guys. I am Devanshi Jain, and I welcome you all to today's session. I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Honorable Justice S.G. Shah. Sir has done his graduation in BSc with microbiology as his main subject and chemistry as a subsidiary subject in the year 1977. Sir has obtained his law degree in the year 1981 with labor law and has done his LLM in Constitution in the year 1987. Sir was enrolled as an advocate in the month of December 1981 at Mehsana, Gujarat, and continued his practice as an advocate till February 1997. During this period, Sir has practiced almost on all sides of law, like civil, constitutional, revenue, etc., in various courts, tribunals, and commissions, which include High Court of Gujarat, Bombay High Court, National Consumer Commission, etc. Mr. Shah was first among the advocates who adopted computer technology as early as in the year 1985. In March 1997, Sir was directly appointed as a judge of the City Civil and Sessions Court, Ahmedabad, by invitation and was sent to Supreme Court of India for classification of cases at Supreme Court in 1997. Mr. Shah had also attended the conference on SAAP technology at Kathmandu in 1997. As a quick learner and his everlasting passion for learning about computers and IT field made him a perfect computer savvy, and he has been instrumental in implementing the project of computerization in New Gujarat High Court complex. During his service as a registrar of the Gujarat High Court, Sir had worked on administrative side for infrastructural requirements of the entire state judiciary, rule-making process of Gujarat High Court, and accounts with financial management of Gujarat High Court. Sir has also worked on cyber crimes and cyber laws and has prepared report on the subject to comment on Information Technology Act. Sir was also appointed as the special judge of the CBI court in Ahmedabad. Thereafter, Mr. Shah was appointed as a registrar of the Supreme Court of India on deputation. Sir's deep knowledge and vast experience contributed a lot in implementing computerization projects in so many courts, like the Supreme Court of India, Madras High Court, Gujarat High Court, and all the district courts of Gujarat. Further, Sir was appointed as a member of the Standing Committee of the Supreme Court of India for monitoring E-Committee for computerization of entire judiciary in the country. Sir was in charge of E-Committee of Supreme Court of India, looking after the computerization of the courts throughout India under E-Court project. He has developed E-Court for the first time in India and had exercised limited powers for interlocutory orders of Supreme Court rules. Sir had also attended an Asia Pacific Court conference which was held at Singapore in 2010. Further, Justice Shah was elevated as an additional judge of the Gujarat High Court on 12th day of November 2012 and was confirmed as the permanent judge on 10th July 2014. Sir, it is an honor to have you on the panel. I, on behalf of United World School of Law, Karnavati University, welcome you to the session.
Hi everyone. Good evening, all of you. I hope now you are able to see this slide and listen my voice.
Yes, sir.
I've admitted all of you, and I'm muting all of you so that you can listen me properly. See, before starting the subject, I would like to show you some slides. Never underestimate your competitor in your life. Expect the unexpected. Think there must be a better way. We cannot direct the wind, but we can adjust ourselves. React now, because time, tide, and opportunity waits for none. Some people are yet coming, so I have to admit them. Admit all. If you want happiness for lifetime, learn to love what you do. Even one man makes difference, and best way to make your dream come true is to wake up. Friends, before starting on the subject, I think it proper that since we are isolated for more than 2 months, all these slides will give you some push in your life. Yet some people are coming. Thereafter, now I would like to go to the subject, the law of Todd. We'll read the paper. Probably all of you would be able to see it on screen. All are yet, so many people are yet coming. Let us start with the subject, law of torts. In the 19th century, railways, and in the 20th, motor vehicles had great impact on the law relating to tort. Broadcasting and television have necessitated changes in the law of defamation, and in the future, satellite broadcasting, cable television, internet, and social media will no doubt occasion more. Pirating of tapes, both audio and video, had posed new issues in economic torts. Pirating of software is not out of the race. I have to again admit some people here. Admit all, mute all. Law is a rule of human conduct accepted by the society and enforced by the state for the betterment of human life. In a wider sense, it includes rule of human action. For example, religious, social, political, and moral rules of conduct. However, only those rules of conduct which are protected and enforced by the state constitute the law of the land in its strict sense. The law of tort, or the word tort, is first identified or defined by Justice Salmon. According to Sir John William Salmon, who was judge of the Supreme Court of New Zealand, the law of tort consists of rules recognized and acted on by courts of justice. Tort law is perhaps the broadest and most volatile, that is unstable and unpredictable area of civil law. Torts are serious threat to our way of life, yet there are many people who still lack the knowledge necessary to fight these torts. Attempt is made to see that you may find everything you need to complete your understanding about torts, whether you are hearing about them for the first time or have studied them for many years. Under the ancient legal system, tort had much narrower conception than the tort of the English law. The punishment of crime in this system occupied a more prominent place than compensation for wrong. The law of tort in India is mainly the English law of torts, which itself is based on the principles of the common law of England. This was made suitable to the Indian conditions, appeasing to the principle of justice, equity, and good conscience, and as amended by the acts of legislature. Its origin is linked with the establishment of British courts in India. I would request all of you to mute yourself. Please mute your mics so that everybody can listen my voice properly. See, the law of tort was not much known to Indian jurisprudence, Indian law, because we are believer of giving forgiveness to everyone. Punishment is a different thing, but giving a compensation in place of a damages or in place of a tortious act was a different idea, and it was initiated in foreign countries, more particularly in England, which has the oldest jurisprudence judicial system. It would not be surprising if the law of tort had in some instances appeared to have ancillary aims other than compensating for or even preventing the recurrence of harms sustained by private individuals. Occasionally, the effect of the law of tort is to aid the administration of the criminal law. So practically, the law of tort has been started to aid the criminal law system. The expression justice, equity, and good conscience drives the field. Therefore, if any rule or statute law replacing or modifying the common law, which are more in consensus with the justice, equity, and good conscience, it is open to the courts in India to reject the outmoded rules of common law and to apply the new rules. For example, the principle of English statute, the law reform Contributory Negligence Act 1945, have been applied in India, although there is still no corresponding act enacted by Parliament in India. However, the development in Indian law need not be on the same lines as in England. In the case of MC Mehta versus Union of India, reported in, I think somebody is.
Sir, I request you to unmute everyone, sir.
I will unmute everyone because some people are talking.
Yeah, sir. Please.
Yes, now everyone is muted. However, the development in Indian law need not be on the same lines as in England. In the case of MC Mehta versus Union of India, reported in AIR 1987 Supreme Court, page number 1086, speaking for Constitution Bench of Supreme Court of India, Justice Bhagwati had said, we have to evolve new principles and lay down new norms which will adequately deal with the new problems which arise in a highly industrialized economy. We cannot allow our judicial thinking to be constituted by reference to the law as it prevails in England or for the matter of that in any foreign country. We are certainly prepared to receive light from whatever source it comes, but we have to build our own jurisprudence. It is now clear that Section 9 of the Code of Civil Procedure, which enables the civil court to try all suit of a civil nature, impliedly confirms jurisdiction to apply the law of torts as principle of justice, equity, and good conscience. Thus, the court can draw up its inherent powers under Section 9 for developing this field of liability. Section 9 of the Code of Civil Procedure 1908, CPC in short, reads as, the court shall, subject to the provisions herein contained, have jurisdiction to try all suits of a civil nature, excepting suits of which their cognizance is either expressly or impliedly barred. See, this section is drafted in the year 1908, but it was required to amend in 1976 and 1977. In 1976, first explanation was added, making it clear that a suit in which the right to property or to an office is contested is a suit of a civil nature, notwithstanding that such right may depend entirely on the decision of questions as to religious rites or ceremonies. As I've said earlier, in Indian jurisprudence before independence and before a couple of decades, the concept was that nobody should be punished, everyone should be forgiven, there should not be interference in religious matters and ceremonies. But as we have seen some Baba's activities in near future, ultimately since 1976, it is made clear that irrespective of religious rites and ceremonies, civil court has jurisdiction to deal with all the dispute of civil nature between individuals. This includes action against tortious acts. The second explanation was added in the year 1977, making it clear that for the purpose of this section, it is immaterial whether or not any fees are attached to the office referred to in explanation 1 or whether or not such office is attached to a particular place. So the place and fees has become irrelevant now. As I have said, the law of tort was not very much old so far as India is concerned. Therefore, we have to find out that how the law has evolved in the country, because the law of tort is not a statute made law. There is no enactment or an act saying or anything about tort. In a judgment of Jayalakshmi Salt Works Private Limited versus State of Gujarat by Supreme Court of India, reported in 1994, 4 SCC page 1, Justice R.M. Sahai observed that, truly speaking, entire law of tort is founded and structured on morality, that no one has a right to injure or harm others intentionally or even non-intentionally. Some people are yet coming. I have to admit them in between. Let us read it again. Truly speaking, entire law of torts is founded and structured on morality, that no one has a right to injure or harm others intentionally or even innocently. Therefore, it would be primitive to class strictly or close finally the ever expanding and growing horizon of tortious liability. even for social development, orderly growth of the society and cultural refinement, improvement, the liberal approach to tortious liability by courts is more conducive, that is favorable. Whereas in a judgment of Vora Sadiq Bhai Razak Bhai versus State of Gujarat and others by Supreme Court of India, reported in AIR 2016 Supreme Court, page number 2429, while considering the principles of strict liability with reference to torts, negligence and compensation, it is held by Justice A.K. Sikri that release of water from dam due to excessive rains when damaging plantation or fields of appellant in absence of adequate evidence produced by respondent authority to show that water in dam was kept at reasonable and proper level to take care of normal rains, and that rains in monsoon season were more than ordinary rain which could not be foreseen. Merely saying that because of heavy monsoon rains, water was released in public interest would not discharge burden of respondent in wardening of allegation of negligence. Thus, when evidence proved that appellants in fact suffered damages, even in absence of evidence showing exact loss, appellants are entitled to reasonable compensation, holding that damage is caused not only on account of rain, but also for negligence on part of respondent authorities in not taking due precaution in time, confirming that doctrine of strict liability would be attracted. I have referred this case up to reported in 2016, just 4 years back, but the disturbing phenomenon or situation is the incident of tort complaint in this case is of the year 1997, wherein compensation was denied by two courts below, that is Civil Court and the High Court, but awarded by the Apex Court, that is Supreme Court, in the year 2016. The appeal arises against the judgment dated 27 June 2011 by Division Bench of High Court of Gujarat, confirming the judgment and decree dated 24th 12 2010 passed by the Principal Senior Judge of Modasa in a special civil suit number 6 of 2010, which was having old number 30 of 1998, whereby the suit of the appellant plaintiff has been dismissed. As we have said, and as it would be clear during this discussion, the law of tort is a court-made law, judge-made law. There is no enactment. But see the situation. A person has claimed damages in the year 1998 for the damage caused in the year 1997, which was denied by two courts below in the year 2010 and 2011, respectively. But in 2016, it was allowed by the Supreme Court. So if somebody has not pleaded or not came to the court, probably this law would not confirm his right. Practically, the whole of the law of tort is to be derived from the judicial precedents, since there is no enactment or statute for law of torts, and it is not codified except for vehicular accidents, that is Motor Vehicles Act, and for product liability, that is Consumer Protection Act, which are more or less procedural law rather than confirming any specific rights in favor of the victims of tort. Though Motor Vehicle Act provides for right to claim compensation by certain class of people in certain circumstances, and such circumstances are so wide that every victim of road accident would be entitled to compensation, irrespective of provision of Section 9, the Indian legislation has, for different reasons, think it fit for separate adjudicating procedure and forum for victims of such torts, that is Motor Vehicle Accident Tribunal and Consumer Forum. As I have said, the whole of the law of tort is derived from the judicial precedent. Practically, there is no enactment like law of tort, and therefore, tort is not defined even in any statute. However, in Common Law Practice Act of 1852, remember it is 1852 of England, that is before 168 years, tort is defined as a wrong independent of contract. A tort is an infringement of right in rem of a private individual, giving a right of compensation at the suit by injured party. Section 2M of Indian Limitation Act 1963 explain that tort means a civil wrong which is not exclusively a breach of contract or breach of trust. Then the moot questions that comes in anybody's mind may be whether every harm or injury is a tort. Who is to decide that what is and what is not a tort? Does tort law makes a distinction between infringement of different kinds of rights? In fact, every harm is not a subject for tort law, and it is for the court to decide that what is and what is not lawful. But then how the court has to decide it? For the purpose, we have to understand that what is tort. A tort is an act or omission which is unauthorized by law but independent of contract. Thus, any act or omission which infringes either some absolute right of another or some qualified right of another, causing damage, or some public right resulting in some substantial and particular damage to some person which is suffered by the public generally, and give rise to an action for damages is called tortious act. I will repeat the last line because I found that sharing was disabled for some reason. Thus, yet some people are still coming. Thus, any act or omission which infringes either some absolute right of another or some qualified right of another causing damage, or some public right resulting in substantial and particular damage to some person which is suffered by the public generally and gives rise to an action for damages is called tortious act. So essential of a tort comes into existence by some act or omission by the defendant which amounts to a violation of plaintiff's right. Defendant's act or omission is thus breach of legal duty imposed on him by law. The violation must not be authorized by law. Such violation inflicts an injury upon the plaintiff for which a remediate law is available. The defendant's act or omission must not be a breach of his contractual, quasi-contractual, or merely equitable obligation, and it should also not be a breach of trust. To put it more precisely, let us recollect it that there must be some wrongful act committed by defendant or someone. Such act results in legal damage to the plaintiff, the victim, and which in turn give rise to legal remedy. Thus, a wrongful act, a legal damage, and a legal remedy are the basic ideas on which the edifice of tort law stands. So the basics of torts, three issues are common. What interests does the law of torts protect? Against what general types of conduct, malicious, intentional, negligent, or accidental, are these several interests protected? When will conduct of a wrongdoer which would normally be a tort in accordance with issue number 1 and 2 above, not subject to him to the liability under the tort because there is some special circumstances which requires an exception to the general rule. See, to detain someone is ordinarily tort, but the policeman or even private person may, in circumstances, authorized to make an arrest, whereupon he will have a defense to an action in tort. Many defenses are common to most and perhaps all torts. These are often styled general offenses. Example of these general offenses are consent, statutory authority, judicial act, etc. In common law jurisdiction, a tort is a civil wrong that unfairly causes someone else to suffer loss or harm, resulting in legal liability for the person who commits the tortious act. Although crimes may be torts, the cause of legal action is not necessarily a crime, as the harm may be due to negligence. A tort is any socially unreasonable conduct which is not contractual, for which a court will grant monetary damages or an equitable remedy to compensate an individual for his or her injury. The word individual is material here. That individual may be more than one, but there must be some individual who suffered some injury and loss. Thus, tort is a wrongful act involving a breach of a legal duty imposed by law and resulting in injuries to another, for which the injured party may institute a civil action for damages. A tort differs from a crime in that a tort is an offense against an individual, whereas a crime is an offense against the society at large, the victim may be individual, for which the state inflicts punishment. A tort differs from a breach of contract in that the legal duty breached by the tort is one imposed by the state, whereas in a breach of contract, the obligation breached is one which the contracting parties have voluntarily assumed. However, the same act may be both tort and crime, as assault and certain public nuisance. Each is a tort because it is an offense against an individual, and a crime because it is an offense against society. Torts may also arise out of contractual relations, as the inducement of an individual by fraudulent representations to purchase merchandise. An act may be simultaneously a breach of contract, a tort, and a crime. For example, the misappropriation of funds by a trustee is a breach of contract of a trust, the tort of conversion, and crime of embezzlement. Legal injuries are not limited to physical injuries and may include emotional, economic, or reputational injuries, as well as violations of privacy, property, or constitutional rights. Torts include such varied topics as auto accidents, vehicular accidents, false imprisonment, defamation, product liability, copyright infringement, and environment pollution, that is toxic torts. While many torts are the result of negligence, tort law also recognizes intentional torts in which a person has intentionally acted in a way that harms another. In addition, when it comes to product liability, the courts have established a doctrine of strict liability for torts arising from injury caused by the use of company's product and or service. Under strict liability, the injured party does not have to prove that the company was negligent in order to win a claim for damages. When it functions properly, this system benefits every citizen in two ways. The law of tort assigns responsibility for damage and the cost associated with it to the person who caused it. And it deters careless behavior by putting people at financial risk for their wrongdoing. So making sure that compensation can be secured through the civil justice system is a central element in making a compensate safe society. However, tort law is different from criminal law in two ways. Tort may result from negligent as well intentional or criminal action. Tort lawsuits have a lower burden of proof, such as preponderance of evidence rather than beyond a reasonable doubt. I believe the topic is little bit different than normal topics listened by you, even under law. But I believe that you all have heard the provisions of IPC or practice in criminal law is how to punish someone. You all are aware that in criminal law, the burden of proof is preponderance of beyond a reasonable doubt, means if there is a single doubt in evidence, there would be acquittal. If there is 100%, if court is 100% sure that culprit has committed the crime, then and then court will punish him. Otherwise, benefit of doubt will be given. There is unwritten rule in some jurisprudence. It is better एक पर निर्दोष ने सजा थवी જોઈએ नहीं. Anyway, let us go to now an interesting case. Sometimes a plaintiff may prevail in a tort case even if the person who allegedly caused harm was acquitted in an earlier criminal trial. As I have said, in lawsuit, the burden of proof is preponderance of and not 100% proof. The example is a case in USA, namely O.J. Simpson, who was acquitted in criminal court for murder, but later found liable for the tort of wrongful death. It is a well-known case of football player cum actor. He was acquitted in criminal trial for murdering his wife and her boyfriend. But when he was quoted in a magazine saying that, let's say I committed this crime. Even I did this, it would have to have because I loved her very much, right? Now, this quotation creates a problem for him, and court has awarded compensation to the legal heirs of the victim. You must be aware about a similar case in India, namely Nanavati murder case, KM Nanavati versus State of Maharashtra, which was in 1959, wherein Indian court case where Nanavati, a naval commander, was tried for the murder of his wife's lover. But the difference is, in India, the law of tort is not much developed, one, and second, in the case of Nanavati, though Nanavati was acquitted by jury trial, the court has convicted him, but thereafter probably nobody has claimed compensation. But in the case of O.J. Simpson, on his statement, victim's family had filed suit and they were awarded $33.5 million in compensatory and punitive damages, thereby finding Simpson responsible for the respective murders. Tort includes deliberate wrongs, intentional tort, and inadvertent or accidental wrongs, negligent torts, as well as wrongs for which the offender is held liable regardless of motivation or ability to prevent the injury, that is strict liability. For business, torts that arise from product liability can have devastating consequences. Product liability is the area of law in which product manufacturers, distributors, and sellers are held responsible for the injuries caused by their products. Traditionally, product liability cases were decided according to the theory of negligence. Negligence is behavior that results in an unintentional injury or causes unintentional harm. Product liability law has evolved, however, and most states have extended product liability into the category of strict liability tort. Strict liability torts involve actions that are inherently dangerous and for which a party may be liable no matter how careful he or she or it performs those actions. Regardless of whether the product liability claim is based upon negligence or strict liability, a product liability claim results from either a design defect, a manufacturing defect, or a failure to warn. Manufacturing defects are those that occur in manufacturing process and usually involve poor quality materials or shoddy workmanship. Design defects occur where the product design is inherently dangerous or useless and hence defective, no matter how carefully manufactured. This may be demonstrated either by showing that the product fails to satisfy ordinary consumer expectations as to what constitutes a safe product, or that the risk of the product made its benefit. Failure to warn. Defects arise in products that carry inherent non-obvious dangers that could be mitigated through adequate warnings to the user. And these dangers are present regardless of how well the product is manufactured and designed for its intended purpose. These defects are not legal claims themselves, but they are the grounds for the action, negligence or strict liability. For example, a plaintiff might be negligent failure to warn or strict liability for defective design. Let us recollect a well-known case. In the case of Liebig versus McDonald's restaurant of 1994, for example, a 79-year-old Stella Liebig spilled McDonald's coffee in her lip, which resulted in second and third degree burns on her thighs and different parts of body, buttocks, groin, and genitals. The burns were severe enough to require skin grafting. She attempted to have McDonald's pay her $20,000 medical bills as indemnity for the incident. McDonald's refused and she sued her. During the case discovery process, internal documents from McDonald's revealed that the company had received hundreds of similar complaints from customers claiming that McDonald's coffee caused sour burns. At trial, this led the jury to find that McDonald's knew that their product was dangerous and injuring their customers, and that the company had done nothing to correct the problem. The jury decided £2 lakh as compensated damages, but attributed 20% of the fault of the lady, reducing her compensation to $1,60,000. However, the jury also awarded $2.7 million as punitive damages, which at the time represented 2 days of McDonald's coffee sales revenue. The judge later reduced the punitive damages to $4,80,000 only. The case is often criticized for the very high amount of damages the jury awarded. But the fact remains that we are still lag behind in claiming such compensation in India. And as disclosed herein, during the case discovery process, probably we are not able to find out the correct evidence. It is a different issue to discuss the law of evidence and CPC, but since my lecture is 26 pages, I have completed only 12 pages and it is almost 5:45. Let me go further as speedy as I can. Strict liability is the imposition of liability on a party without finding of fault, such as negligence or tortious intent. The claimant need only prove that the tort occurred and the defendant was responsible. The law imputes strict liability to situations it considers to be inherently dangerous. It discourages reckless behavior and needless loss by forcing potential defendants to take every possible precaution. It also has the effect of simplifying and thereby expediting court decision in the in these cases. In strict liability situations, although the plaintiff does not have to prove fault, the defendant can raise a defense of absence of fault. That is, the defense can argue that the defect was the result of plaintiff's actions, not of the product, and that no inference of defect should be drawn solely because an accident occurs. On the other hand, if plaintiff can prove that the defendant knew about the defect before the damages occurred, in some jurisdiction, additional punitive damages can be awarded to the victim. The burden of proof in tort action, a preponderance of evidence, is much lighter than state's burden in criminal action, where it is beyond a reasonable doubt. Because the burden of proof is much lighter in tort action, it is possible to prevail in a tort case while the state does not succeed in its related criminal prosecution. The bottom line is that it is essential to differentiate between a tort and a crime. A tort is any social unreasonable conduct which is not contractual, for which a court of law will grant monetary damages or an equitable remedy to compensate an individual for his or her injury, whereas crime is an offense against the public and has little, if anything, to do with compensating the victim of the crime. The second part of the law of tort is damage and damages. In general, a tort consists of some act done by a person who causes injury to another, for which damages are claimed by the latter against the former. In this connection, we must have a clear notion with regard to the words damage and damages. The word damage is used in the ordinary sense of injury or loss or deprivation of some kind, whereas damages mean the compensation claimed by the injured party and awarded by the court. Damages are claimed and awarded by the court to the parties. The word injury is strictly limited to an actionable wrong, while damage means loss or harm occurring in fact, whether actionable as an injury or not. The real significance of a legal damage is illustrated by two maxims, namely damnum sine injuria and injuria sine damnum. Damnum sine injuria means damage without injury. There are many acts which, though harmful, are not wrongful and give no right of action to him who suffers from their effects. Damage so done and suffered is called damnum sine injuria, or damage without injury. Damage without breach of legal right will not constitute a tort. There are instances of damage suffered from justifiable acts. An act or omission committed with lawful justification or excuse will not be cause of action, though it results in harm to another as a combination in furtherance of trade, interest, or lawful user of one's own premises. There are moral wrongs for which the law gives no remedy, though they cause great loss or detriment. Loss or detriment is not a good ground of action unless it is the result of a species of wrong of which the law takes cognizance. The second is injuria sine damnum, means injury without damage. This means an infringement of a legal private right without any actual loss or damage. In such a case, a person whose right has been infringed as a good cause of action, it is not necessary for him to prove any special damage, because every injury imports a damage when a man is hindered of his right. Every person has an absolute right to property, to the immunity of his person, and to his liberty. And an infringement of this right is actionable per se. Actual perceptible damage is not therefore essential as the foundation of an action. It is sufficient to show the violation of a right in which case the law will presume damage. Thus, in case of assault, battery, false imprisonment, libel, trespass on land, etc., the mere wrongful act is actionable without proof of special damage. The court is bound to award to the plaintiff at least nominal damages if no actual damage is proved. This principle was firmly established by the election case of SB versus White, in which the plaintiff was wrongfully prevented from exercising his vote by defendants, returning officers in parliamentary election. The candidate for whom the plaintiff wanted to give his vote had come out successful in the election. Still, the plaintiff brought an action claiming damages against the defendants for maliciously preventing him from exercising his statutory right of voting in that election. The plaintiff was allowed damages, saying that there was infringement of a legal right vested in the plaintiff. SB versus White is widely believed to have established the principle that for every right, there must be a remedy. The maxim is now known as the ubi jus ubi remedium principle. The case of SB versus White, decided on 1st January 1703, that is before 317 years only, by the courts of King's Bench and reported in so-and-so, is a foundational case in UK constitutional law and English tort law. It concerns the right to vote and misreason of a public officer, wherein it is observed and held that if the plaintiff has a right, he must of necessity have a means to vindicate and maintain it, and a remedy if he is injured in the exercise of enjoyment of it. And indeed, it is a vain thing to imagine a right without a remedy, for want of right and want of remedy are reciprocal. We'll skip this case of Watkins, wherein it is something differently said, because that principle has not been followed in India by Supreme Court in the case of Vora Sadiq Ali Razak. But the law of tort is said to be developed on the maxims ubi jus ubi remedium, or there is no wrong without a remedy. If a man has a right, he must of necessity have a means to vindicate and maintain it, and a remedy if he is injured in the exercise of or enjoyment of it. And indeed, it is a vain thing to imagine a right without remedy. Want of right and want of remedy are reciprocal. Tort law is law created through judges in common law and by legislature, that is statutory law. Torts are civil wrongs recognized by law as grounds for a lawsuit. These wrongs result in an injury or harm consisting the basis for claim by the injured party. While some torts are also crimes punishable with imprisonment, the primary aim of tort law is to provide relief for the damages incurred and deter others from committing the same harms. The injured person may sue for an injunction to prevent the constitution of the tortious conduct or for monetary damages. Among the type of damages the injured party may recover are loss of earning capacity, pain and suffering, reasonable medical expenses, etc. They include both present and future expected losses. There are numerous specific torts including trespass, assault, battery, negligence, product liability, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Tort falls into three general categories: intentional torts, that is intentionally hitting a person; negligent tort, causing an accident by failing to obey traffic rules; and strict liability tort, e.g. liability for making and selling defective products. Intentional torts are those wrongs which the defendant knew or should have known would occur through their actions or inactions. Negligent torts occur when the defendant's actions were unnecessarily unreasonably unsafe. Strict liability wrongs do not depend on the degree of carefulness by the defendant, but are established when a particular action causes damage. I believe more than 50 minutes or 55, it is 5:55. I have completed almost half the lecture, but now I must give participant time to raise questions so that it may be answered. I would request the college authority, university authority to take up the charge. Before Mr. Sagar, hello. हाँ बस अब तमें ले लो चार्ज અને question answer કરો. It is 5:55 now. I hope everyone has enjoyed it. It may be to some extent a boring subject, but ultimately I have tried to explain the theory as speedy as I can. Now I believe participants may raise their questions. Hello, Sagar bhai. Now control is with the university. Mr. Sagar will ask or allow you to raise the question. Probably it would be better if you raise your hand to ask a question. Nobody is there. To some extent, it is difficult. हेलो ना मैं छोड़ी દીધું અહીંથી ઓ મેં તો અહીંથી છોડી દીધું નથી આવતું હું બંધ કરીશ તો બધું બંધ થઈ જશે ને મેં તો છોડી દીધું અહીંથી કેમ આમ થાય
Okay. Now one by one, actually, if you have any questions, we can take a maximum 5 questions. You can raise your hand and host would actually take you there. Okay, so we can take some 5 questions looking at the paucity of the time. So 5 questions, please. Anyone, if you have any questions, actually, please raise your hand and the host would take you there. Darshak has a question. Darshak Trivedi has raised his hand. So Darshak, can you actually go ahead, please?
So thank you very much. It's a wonderful topic, and we are very much happy that it's a very good lesson from your end. And there is no question. Just I am admitted that we are very much happy, and thanks for this type of lectures. And I will request you to just give another more informative lectures on other issues also. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Darshak. Thank you very much. Yashvi has some question. Yashvi, can you go ahead, please?
Yes, sir. First of all, thank you so much, sir, for such a enlightening session. My question is that in India, the law of tort is developing very slowly, right? For various reasons such as illiteracy or lack of political conscience. So, what can we do? What are the major changes in terms of technology that we can do bring so that more people are aware of their rights and they can approach court for the matters of tort?
Perfect. Justice Shah. Hello.
Yeah, yes, I will answer. It's a good question. See, I have given an example of a case of Vora Sadiq Bhai. If a case was not filed in the year 78, and though he was unsuccessful at both civil court in Modasa and High Court at Ahmedabad, if he has not reached to Supreme Court, probably there would not be a verdict in 2016 that there is misfeasance by the government officers in not maintaining the level of a dam at a proper level in heavy rain condition. They should have started the dewatering periodically, and there was a miscompensation was awarded. So first thing, what is required is, you are right, awareness to the public or people, but at the same time, awareness of lawyers. You all, probably majority of you will be advocate or in the field of law. There must be a new case before you. You must realize that there is a Tortious Act and we must ask for a compensation, and you should fight it till the end. But so far as technology is concerned, awareness by technology is altogether a different thing. We may go to the villages and explain that what are Tortious Act and what is your responsibility, which is probably today done by judicial academies under their program. But yes, everyone can do it. But unless there is a will amongst the people to fight for their right, and not only to fight, but to claim compensation for their right, the law of tort would not develop properly in India. Yes? You want any more clarification? Yashvi Sangani?
Yashvi, are you? Okay, I think we should go ahead. Ashok Shroff has a question. Ashok sir, over to you.
Sir, no question is required here. Myself, Dr. Ashok Shroff, Dean Faculty of Law, HNDU Patan. Sir, very nice and informative lecture. Sir, I know, sir, he's connected with technology also. So, sir, I want to ask one question. Sir, what new kind of technology will use court in forthcoming years, sir, for the deliver judgment or?
It is difficult to say about the activities of the judicial system when I'm former judge, retired. Let them have. I have computerized all the courts throughout India, but so far as their internal activities concerned, with due respect, I will say
Yes,
that this is one of the reasons why law of tort is not evolved in India, that our bureaucracy, including judicial bureaucracy, I think you will get it properly because you are in field. The bureaucracy,
Thank you.
administrative bureaucracy, including judicial bureaucracy, does not want to leave their freedom, decision-making freedom. Otherwise, so far as help of technology is concerned, before 2 decades, even before 2 decades, I have suggested the judiciary that with the cause list, means list of the cases being listed daily before the court, let the back system support the list with latest law point, latest citations and everything. But unfortunately, judiciary is not ready to let go their freedom of less said is better. But so far as technology is concerned,
Thank you, sir, for
thank you.
Okay.
This
Uh,
someone has
thank you, sir,
written.
respected HC sir, and organizer of this webinar.
One minute, Sagar. 1 minute, Sagar. Last question. Someone has written Galaxy J7 Max. One has written a long question in a field. There is a slum near garden. They have no water facility nearby garden. Authority was first ready to give, but then they said that if you will take permission from SMC, probably it is Surat Municipal Corporation, then only water will be provided. And SMC is not ready to provide them water as they are laborers and living there without any right. So what can be done in this case? Because water is a basic right, so isn't it comes under tort or right to life? It doesn't come under tort because SMC doesn't have a legal liability to provide water to the roadside dwellers, laborers. They are roadside dwellers. They don't have a right to stay there. But so far as right to life is concerned, in my lecture, I could not reach to up to the end, but you are right. They may file a writ petition either before a high court or before the Supreme Court that if local authorities or other authorities want such laborers to work in a municipal corporation area, and if there is no dwelling facility, means there is no residential facility for them, and if local authority allows such laborers to have their stay on a roadside, then local authority must provide them water and drainage both. But for that you have to fight like street vendors. There is a long run history about street vendors. Ultimately, Supreme Court had said that every local authority should have rules that where street vendors should be allowed, in how much number, and in which manner. Similarly, same things may happen for such laborers who are dwelling or having their abode on roadside.
Galaxy J7, what is your name? That is the question which you have posted.
Galaxy J7 Max.
My name
Yes,
is
what is your name, please?
Tanvi.
Tanvi, okay. Tanvi, have you got your answer?
Yes, sir. But the one thing I wanted to ask is there any temporary solution for them? Because they are running out of water. They don't have any facilities of even drinking water.
Yes, they can certainly reach the local authority and local legal services authority. Legal services authority is there at every district place. They can approach that authority and local authority to provide them water, or some NGO or local trust. Because in India and Gujarat, generally people are making parab and even chas is being, buttermilk chas is being distributed among so many people by some authority, some NGOs or some local people. They can approach such people.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Aditya has a question. Aditya, please go ahead.
So my question is very simple, that in tort damages are given. So in foreign countries, when we see the damages, they are in exorbitant amount, like very high amount, like in millions. But when we compare it to the compensation given in India, it is very less. It is like peanuts. So why is that?
It's a very right question. Very interested and interesting. So see, the difficulty is, you should remember a story of Birbal, when Birbal was at fault and he was to be punished by some punitive damages. He simply asked the Akbar that let me select the judge, and he select particular person as a judge, knowing fully well that judge would not dare to say some amount. I don't want to name them, that community or something, but unfortunately our mind is so narrow that we don't understand the actual damages. As you said, in foreign it is extraordinary, but it is not extraordinary. In case of motor accident, I used to say to the judge always, when there is a discussion regarding damages or compensation for pain, shock and sufferings, that, sir, unless you have a fracture and hospitalized for a couple of weeks in a bed, you will not realize that what is pain, shock and suffering. Because some of the judges are awarding only few hundred or thousand rupees for pain, shock and suffering, whereas Supreme Court has said that minimum 1 lakh for pain, shock and suffering. But then again, some judges has reduced it to 30,000. So see, the amount of compensation or damages is depend upon a person who is awarding it. If I believe my life is a precious, I will award a handsome amount to others. But if I believe that my life has no value, I believe everybody's life has no value, and I will not award a reasonable amount. Neither lucrative nor punitive, but a reasonable amount. But you are right. In India, even today, courts and judges do not understand that what is the actual word, meaning of the word compensation. It means the other side, or the injured, is to be put in a same condition as if there was no injury to him, which is hardly impossible, and therefore any amount for pain, shock and suffering is less. If there is an amputation of leg or of hand, you can't compensate a person with another hand or leg, and in that case, and any amount is less. Yes.
Okay. Anyone has any questions? Please raise your hands and I will get to you. Anyone? Any questions? Okay. I think, sir, there are no more questions. Okay. So on behalf of, sir, United World School of Law, Karnavati University, I would like to place on record my heartfelt gratitude to Honorable Justice Mr. S.J. Shah for sparing his valuable time with us. Apart from our esteemed guest, my special thanks to all UWSL students and all other students and faculty who have been present here. We would be continuing with such kind of actually enriching lectures, and we want you to be there actually participating with us. Be happy and enjoy actually your life.
Thank you all of
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you
Thank you very much. Okay. Have a nice day ahead. Thank you.